Hello, this is Dread, and in today's video topic, this is going to be a patch notes TLDR. Get a cup of coffee, get some tea. We're going to be going over all of the patch notes for last Epoch 1.2 Tombs of the Erased. Now, this is not going to be every single change. Also, as well, there's a bunch of skill reworks in general that I'm not going to go into detail for, but pretty much, we're just going to talk about what interested me when I read the patch notes. Re-entering echoes that had previously been entered have a reduced amount of events, such as nemesises or exiled mages, and drop less loot. This prevents us from having to drastically reduce the amount of content and rewards echoes contain, as leaving and re-entering them on purpose was emergent gameplay and would be very strong and unintuitive gameplay loop that we want to avoid. Not only that, this is also a nerf to CHP builds, because you can't just go in there, die, go in there again, die, go in there again, die, and get the same amount of loot as before. You will now get actually penalized for dying, which is like really kind of something we were missing, to be honest. Time Rot, Doom, and Abyssal Decay now use different rules for being replaced when afflicted character is at maximum stacks of the ailment. They will only be replaced with the new ailment would deal more damage. This is huge for Doom. Doom actually makes sense now. That's amazing. Like, Doom is insane now. Oh my god. Doom actually makes sense now. Fixed a bug which caused many minions to not receive the inherent 50% less damage taken from powerful abilities. In particular, all Acolyte and Sentinel minions suffered from this bug. Forged weapons buff, like skeleton buff, that's great. The first mastery bonus grants 1.5% more damage per 10% of remaining health from granting increased damage for Paladin. So the mastery that used to just give you 100% increased damage now gives you 15% more damage. And it's generic damage as well, which is a huge buff because you're getting plenty of percent damage with the Paladin. Defiance now has a 5-point threshold bonus that grants +1 endurance threshold per 2% uncapped resistance. This is at the base of Paladin. Pretty much it's just a way of getting a bunch of endurance threshold per uncapped elemental resistance. Devouring Blade now grants 5% increased damage per point and 0.1% leech per point. You can put like 10 points in this. This is at the base of Void Knight. And now every Sentinel has access to generic leech, which is insane. That is very good for Sentinel in general. There was a lot of problems with that, of just not having access to leech. This is a buff to a lot of different builds. Void Essences now grant 3% more void and melee damage instead of being just like percent increased. So you can get a total of 18% more damage for your Erasing Strike build that you did not have access to back in the day. Volatile Reversal has been reworked. It's a completely different skill. I'm not entirely sure how good it is, but it's completely different. Something to note, Anomaly, 100% increase damage taken from Void, like the thing that doubled your Void damage, has not been nerfed. So go wild, go crazy. It has not been nerfed. I will be making updates to planners and stuff like that. For some reason, they decided that, Volatile Reversal was OP, but dealing double damage with Anomaly was not OP for some reason. Weird. Devouring Orb got a big rework, but mainly now it also does damage over time around the orb. That's really nice. Each aura can also deal damage like on multiple enemies. So if you have like 6 orbs, they'll do like 600% damage per second. This is a huge buff because now Devouring Orb just has like more spell dot void like buffs. It's really nice. Now Erasing Strike changes here. Let's look at Erasing Strike here. Second here. There you go. Erasing Strike. Obliteration grants 10% more damage per point, doubled while wielding a two-handed weapon instead of just a bunch of flat damage. This is a huge buff. This is an absolute huge buff, like crazy buff for Erasing Strike, because you weren't really maxing out this node because it wasn't really worth your time. Rifts of Destruction have been replaced by Dematerialize, which grants 15% more damage over time per point. That is really good for like if you're doing Time Rot Erasing Strike stuff. Very nice. An ailment Erasing Strike if you're to do so. Don't do that. Hammer Throw. Ricochet no longer grants 30% less hit damage or 60% reduced stun duration. It now prevents throwing extra projectiles prevents throwing extra projectiles, but gets 10% more hit damage and more attack speed per extra projectile. This is a huge buff to NRES technique builds. You can actually grab this node when you're like killing a boss, and you will do significantly more damage than if you were doing it before. It will reduce your clear, but the idea is you can take the node out once you're done killing the boss. It's going to be actually insane for NRES technique builds, do a lot of damage for just a single point. Javelin got a decent size rework that I can't detail here. Pretty much most of it is just like making it actually function as a skill instead of like before, so that's nice. Judgment. Highest offering now consumes 5% of current mana per point, up for 20%. So you can get 5 points in that, so it's 25% of your mana, and it gives 2% more damage per 1 mana consumed, which is like it's pretty much the same amount of damage, but it's really nice to like be able to like, you know, use this for like the aura stuff. Speaking of aura stuff, Anointed no longer grants 2 seconds cooldown duration. Cool. It now also grants 100% increased duration of Consecrated Aura, so it lasts for longer, and 100% more damage over time. This is to make up for only being able to have one Consecrating Aura active at once. This is a buff to Aura Din. I don't know if Aura Din is going to be good or not, but it's definitely a buff to it. Multi-Strike. Increased based area by 33%. Sweeping blows now also causes multi-strike to deal damage in a larger area as well. This is really nice because area on multi-strike, it's going to make it like clear like a beast. And of course, you know, Bladestorm has been reworked. I'm really excited to play multi-strike when I get a chance to. Shield Bash now has 150% added damage effectiveness instead of 100%. This is a huge buff to Shield Bash. Now you will be doing 50% more damage. Shield Rush. Fix an issue where Shield Rush online could lead to a stuck movement animation effect. This is a huge buff to Shield Rush. You can actually play Shield Rush again. Look forward to Shield Rush builds coming from me now that I can actually play the fucking skill. Shield Throw. Big rework, I can't go into detail here. Pretty much the base functionality change where like now you don't have to like take a bunch of points to tax yourself to like have a 0 mana cost spammable shield throw, which is great. Smelter's Wrath now has 600% added damage effectiveness, which is nice. It's a decent buff. Volcanic Mastery now grants doubled critical strike chance instead of being guaranteed crit, which is fine, and now grants 50% more hit damage when fully charged. This is a nerf to using Smelter's Wrath during progression, but it's okay, no one was doing that. But it does give you a buff to when you're like min-maxing your Smelter's Wrath, which is cool. There's a bunch of other small changes and a rework to how the base functionality works. Pretty much the idea here is instead of being it based on per second of charge, it's just if you're at max charge, you do 100% more damage. So that's a buff to things like World Splitter. So look forward to me playing World Splitter Smelter's Wrath again and seeing if it's actually good again. Smite. Fissure's description has been clarified to state it lasts 3 seconds, incorrectly stated 5, has 200% added damage effectiveness per second, incorrectly stated 36, and it consumes mana when triggered rather than having a mana cost. Fissure now requires a direct smite cast to trigger and has a base limit of 1 per second from 0.5. Fissure can also be converted to lightning from Order of Agon. This is very important. Aftershock's functionality has been reworked and now grants +1 max physical fissure triggers per second. So pretty much you can have up to 9 fissures per second this way as long as you have enough cast speed and fissures are actually usable. Smite Fissure might be really good. Conviction no longer grants 5% less cast speed per point. This is the base crit node. Nice. You have less points to put in it, but now you don't have 5% less cast speed anymore. Immolate now grants 10% more fire damage per point. You get 20% more fire damage pretty much for playing Ignite Smite, which is cool. Symbols of Hope. Completely reworked, but some things include, some of the shenanigans include free mana regen, critical strike chance, and some healing effectiveness stuff, including like being able to have a burst of healing effectiveness for like about like 1,000% healing effectiveness for a few seconds. Pretty cool. Vengeance, also completely reworked, but some stuff includes being able to summon forged weapons, iron blade stuff that does not look bad anymore, by the way, some bleed synergy, some ignite synergy. Lots of cool stuff for Vengeance. Actually looks playable as a main damage skill now. We'll definitely keep you posted. I will try it. Warpath. Warrior's Fury no longer only applies to direct uses of Warpath. Huge nerf to Echo Warpath, but it's a buff to the other versions of Warpath because now you don't have to feel bad for like using Warrior's Fury and not Echo, right? Like I just played a version of it on the channel and you know, that version's getting buffed. So it's nice to see that like now we don't have to, you know, deal with only ever playing Echo Warpath with Warrior's Fury. Forged Weapons. Forged weapons deal 30% more damage and take 50% less damage. These buffs are compensation for the bug fix to Phantom Grip. But what's really cool about this is I never used Phantom Grip because I knew it was bugged. So this is a ultra giga buff for me because when I use Forged Weapons. Forged Weapons are like one of the only minions that I see right now that are tolerable to play. So expect a Forged Weapon build from me eventually. Heartseeker. Big new marksman only skill. We'll do a video on it. I will do a video on that. Dark Quiver. You can now hold up to 3 black arrows at once. They finally listened to us. You can only spend 1 per at a time, but you can hold 3. Oh my goodness. This is a buff to builds like multi-shot that like gets +2 pierce when they have a black arrow and stuff like that. This is a buff to builds that like spam bow attacks, right? With Dark Quiver instead of just, you know, only using 1 is a huge buff. Huge buff. Explosive Trap, a bunch of nerfs here. Subtle Sabotage grants 10% less mana per point instead of 20%. Trap Splinker adds 1 flat mana cost per point. Arrow traps chain detonations can only release detonating arrows up to 10 times per 2 seconds from no limit. This is a huge nerf. You will no longer be able to have infinite detonating arrows coming out. This does not limit detonations, only whether those detonations release detonating arrows. This is a huge nerf to the detonating arrow explosive trap build. So that build will probably like not be playable anymore. Fixed a bug where explosive trap could not create additional traps up to your maximum traps if you allocated blast rain in no man's land. This is important because there's a specific build that I want to play where it's like a hold explosive trap build, and the idea is we freeze enemies and stuff like that and spam no man's land with a blast rain. It's something I want to play, but I couldn't play because, you know, of course it didn't fucking work. So that might actually come out eventually. That's nice. Puncture. Bloodthirst Bleeding Fury buff now respects Puncture's ailment conversions. For example, it will grant poison chance that a bleed chance if Scalebane is allocated. It will also give you Frostbite chance, so you can actually play Frostbite Rogue, which is cool. It's actually viable now. Chthonic Fissure now releases 20% less frequently baseline, and it also has less frequency in the tree. And Beacon of Torment effects now apply to you if you use Wheel of Torment. Now, these are very tame Chthonic Fissure nerfs. Very tame Chthonic Fissure nerfs. Like, they could have went way harder into this. Like, this is like the kind of nerfs that I want to see, because like now you can still play Chthonic Fissure. It's not a big deal. Profane Veil fixed a bug where Profane Veil's Apocalypse is not applying more damage or increased area effects on zombies onto it. I noticed that when I tried to play it for a Zero to Hero series. Nice to see that it's actually fixed. Nice. Sacrifice. Pontifex now has maximum benefit of 90% more damage. This does not scale with point investment. So the whole point of this used to give you like almost infinite damage with Sacrifice if you built up enough minions and stuff like that. It now no longer does that. So Sacrifice is no longer one-tapping bosses and stuff like that. Huge nerf. There's also a nerf to like the zombie potion belt stuff, which we'll be talking about later. Spirit Plague. Future Recovery now grants 12 ward when hitting an enemy instead of 4, but you're now limited to 10 times for 2 seconds. So now you have way less ward per second. It's fine. It's like, it's deserved, to be honest. It was kind of overpowered. Infernal Shade buff. Shade Eruption from Infernal Shade's Combustion now has 200% added damage effectiveness instead of 100%. This build was this build was already pretty good, by the way. I have no idea why they buffed it. All right. Kudos. Nice. Also, the Infernal Shade build has not been nerfed. Nice. Flame Whip now has 300% added damage effectiveness from 100% with an equivalent base damage. Huge Flame Whip buffs. We might actually play Flame Whip. Fix a bug where orders, this is in the Rune Master tree. Fixed a bug where orders in position threshold bonus was granting Branded Deception 5 to 6% more damage per 1% global shock chance based on points allocated, despite giving it 1%. Now it just gives 6% more per 1% block chance at 1% shock chance, so it actually is viable still. That's nice. Branded Deception might still be usable next patch since they fixed the bug, but they buffed it. So Branded Deception might be playable next patch again. Nice. Arcane Currents, this is the note at the top of Sorcerer. Arcane Currents threshold bonus grants Static Orb 100% chance to inflict Spark Charge on hit from granting 100% Spark Charge chance from any skill that costs at least 40 mana. Rest in piss. Rest in piss. Frostclaw. Bright Frost no longer cleanses ailments when you use Frostclaw. This is cool. I have no idea why it did this in the first place. It was rather absurdly strong. It was very, very strong. Lightning Blast. New base effect. Chains up to an additional enemy for each time it's directly cast recently in the last 4 seconds up to 2 times. The Arcane Power node raises the chain limit based on this effect. They aren't applied separately. This is nice. Base Lightning Blast buffs. This is a buff to Sorcerer or Mage in general at the beginning of the campaign, because now you actually have a clear skill, because now it chains. Nice. Now you don't feel like as though you have no AoE until you get until you get freaking, what is it called? Elemental Nova. At this point, I think you just spec into Lightning Blast until you get access to Elemental Nova. Also, Lightning Blast has like a lot of other changes in the tree. It got like a bunch of buffs and stuff like that. Meteor. Twin Meteor grants an additional meteor from direct cast and adds 50 mana instead of 70. Same thing on all the other ones. They're from direct cast. This is a nerf to the Meteor Belt. Rest in piss, Meteor Belt. Rest in piss. It's a buff to direct cast because now it doesn't cost as much mana. Very nice. Very nice nerfs to the Meteor Belt because it deserved it. Static Orb. Mana Charge grants 2% maximum mana as additional mana cost per point from 4, and now can only grab 100 additional mana cost from this effect from no limit. Rest in piss, Static Orb. Rest in piss. Overcharge Detonation grants 1% more hit damage. It's probably going to be still insanely strong, mind you. I just want to let you know that. It's just not going to be blitheringly OP anymore. It's just like, it's still going to be strong. Fix the bug where Aftershocks benefited from Shatter Quake twice if they were converted to damage over time by the upheaval node. Rest in piss. .eq. Rest in piss. A bunch of generic damage nerfs as well to Earthquake. Rest in piss. Rest in piss. That's all I have to say on that. Finally. Storm Totem. Unmatched Storms also grant Storm Totem 20% less damage. There's also some other nerfs later, but it's not going to stop it from doing infinite damage, it seems. I don't even know why Unmatched Storm exists in the game, considering the node says like 80% less cast speed and 20% less damage. Just remove the fucking node at this point. Goodness God. Swarmblade form. Never Ending Drove grants 25% more Locust Swarm duration per point instead of increased. This is really nice because this incentivizes a playstyle where you build up a big Locust Swarm, swap into like human form, and use other skills like Earthquake for like the .eqs and stuff like that. That's interesting because now you can like play Locust Swarm with like Earthquake .eqs, although it did just get nerfed, mind you. But now like there might be a Locust, like a Swarmblade build that like actually functions on single target. We'll see. That 25% more Locust Swarm duration is very nice, mind you. It's very, very, very good. Tornado buffs. Now has 125% added damage effectiveness per second with an equivalent base damage from 75%, almost double. Now costs 22 mana. Ooh. Stormbringer now gets increased area of effect. That is very nice. Infernal has been reworked and now grants 50% of your ignite chance on hit with fire skills as ignite per second per point, up to 4. So now you can get 200% of your ignite per second per tornado. Ignite Tornado might be a build. It might be a build. We'll definitely make a planner on that. Upheaval, 69. Nice. Master of the Totem now stacks up to 4 times from Unlimited. Its description has been clarified to specify the more damage stack from each is also multiplicative with other stacks and other modifiers. Rest in piss. Rest in piss. They also buffed it a little bit too by giving them more duration. Upheaval totems might actually be playable outside of like that specific thing. Now that's it for skill changes. We have generic changes here. Loot lizards spawn less frequently by default. It was kind of getting absurd, although this is a nerf to leveling because like there's gonna be less like runes and stuff in general. Rune prisons spawn slightly less frequently by default. No one was killing these anyways. Health gained per character level has been increased. That's a decent amount. You're going from 800 flat from leveling to 100 flat, so it's like an extra 200 in life at max. That's like a whole affix in total. That's very nice. New affix, ward per second, ward decay threshold, spawns on rings and amulets. Looks pretty good. New affix, added health and added health regeneration, spawns on rings and relic. This is a buff to Beastmaster specifically. Endurance threshold can only roll on belts. Previously on helmets, gloves, rings, and relics. This is a huge nerf to a lot of different builds, and I have no idea why they did it. Literally no idea why they did it. I have no fucking clue. It's a nerf to marksman. It's a nerf to a bunch of different things. I don't know why this exists. I'm very annoyed at this because it was actually interesting to build endurance threshold, but no, they had to go and remove it. The chance to create an earthquake aftershock at a nearby enemy on melee attack affix now rolls 20 to 40% from 3 to 8 and can trigger 10 times per 2 seconds from no limit and can no longer trigger if earthquake cannot create aftershocks. This is a huge, and I mean huge, buff to the avalanche loot build. Now you can use Tempest Strike to get mana back and swing at things, create aftershocks, which create boulders, which then of course can create earthquakes, which can create more aftershocks and stuff like that. Now you don't have to actually manually cast earthquake, and you can cast something like Swipe or Tempest Strike or something like that to actually like regen your mana easier, so you can actually like play a build where you just generate a bunch of like pretty much you can generate a bunch of boulders and stuff like that this way. That's gonna be fun. The experimental affix volatile zombie summoned on potion use is now bees summoned on potion use. Rest in piss. Rest in piss. Walking into the area of effect of Jurla's Frigid Tide within 0.5 seconds of the spell going off will no longer result you in taking damage as if it had hit you. Holy crap, I thought I was the only one that thought that. It was a bug. Nice. Covenant Dominion's explosion ability deals 50% less damage. This also affects other enemies. This is huge! Huge! It was doing so much fucking damage. Dude. Initial decay rate of boss ward has been doubled. Nice. That's very good for bad builds. Players take 15% less damage over time. We already knew about this. Enemies' damage bonus from corruption is only half as effective against damage over time. Nice. Now you no longer will die constantly to damage over time. Added minimum base Weaver's Will scaling to prevent very low Weaver's Will values at higher levels. This is very good for farming like Font of the Erase and stuff like that. Now Weaver's Will actually be usable in endgame. Battle Mage's Endeavor buffs. It now grants 45 to 75% when you use a melee attack and hit instead of 48%. This is a buff to like that build. That's nice. Cool. Boulder's Wrath can trigger up to 2 times every 5 seconds. I don't think it's going to be good enough still, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be playable. Eye of Ring got reworked a little bit. Now it has a cap, but it works on everything now again. So you can use it with your Warpath build and stuff like that. Also, the fire damage over time was buffed as well. Interesting. So the item can either give you 300% increased fire damage over time or like a bunch of crit multi. Very interesting, by the way. Actually, nice. Hazelroot now grants 22 to 35% chance instead of 11 to 18. Holy crap, this is such a huge buff. Armor stacking on Primalist might be really strong next patch on certain builds. Very nice. Sorry, 1 second. It's being dumb. Ring of the Third Eye has been capped. No longer infinite ward from it. Nice. Urzel's Pride actually got buffed. You get 1% regen per 2% uncapped lightning res instead of 1% per 3. That's huge. We like that. We like that here. Vessel of Strife now grants 20 to 40% of health regen added as ward instead of 40 to 66. This is actually just to make up for the fact that health regen is getting buffed across the board, by the way. Like, this isn't like a big nerf, to be honest. Like, we were told about this beforehand. Invoker's static touch ward when you hit a shocked enemy is unlimited 3 times per 2 seconds. Completely dead. Rest in piss. It was so stupid. Thank God. It was really stupid. Shattered Lance's 2-piece set bonus has been capped. Cool. This needed to happen. It was ridiculous otherwise. This needed to happen. Sinathia's Resurrection now grants 32 to 46% chance when one of your skeleton dies to resummon one after 3 seconds. That's 20%. And it also gives you more block chance. This is huge because now I'm pretty sure you can get a very close amount to 100% chance. This plus like cruelty might end up making like an auto bomber kind of set. Sorry about that. Making an auto bomber setup actually viable. Because you can get it to like, I think like 40% chance in the tree now, something like that. Holy crap. We might have to play that. That might actually be fun. Now, the last thing here, Bazaar changes. There's now a minimum listing price of 500 gold and a maximum listing price of 1.5 billion? Yeah, billion gold. There's now a 15% listing price tax. Taxes. I can't get away from taxes anywhere. Taxes being applied everywhere. God fucking damn it, taxes. Direct player-to-player trade has been removed. Data shows that this was rarely used compared to other avenues such as Bazaar, peer-to-peer gifting through party play, or uses with resonances. Instead, it was mainly used for real money trading, which harms legitimate gameplay and enjoyment. Rest in piss, RMT. Rest in piss. Get fucked, motherfuckers. With all that being said, this has been Dread. Off to go do something else. If you want to read the patch notes, they're still out. Like, there's a bunch of them. I just talked about the stuff that were relevant to me. Bye.